It's my pleasure to announce Ken Knight, Senior Solutions Consultant with Vrakas Computer Consulting. Kara Schiller, Principal with Vrakas CPAs Advisors. Today's session will focus on reporting. Every business has financial reporting requirements. So let's hike through Sage 100 and see how you can make them a breeze. The floor is yours.
Okay. Well, folks, as you said, my name is Ken Knight, and although I'm relatively new to the Vrakas Computer Consulting, I have been working in the Sage 100 space for 26 years in February. So it's been a while, back to the DOS days, but hey, not trying to show myself as being, yeah, I was aging myself, definitely. So our agenda for today, we are concentrating on Sage 100 financial reporting. I do say that because if you are using Intact, that's its own beast as far as financial reporting, totally different from Sage 100. Totally cool, but totally different. What we're going to be talking about are the prerequisites for good financial reporting. And the format that we're going to follow is I'm going to talk about some of the setup and things in Sage 100 that actually matter to provide good financial reporting. And then Kara is going to talk about it from the perspective of an auditor and explain to you why those things really matter. And then I will show you in the software what I was referring to.
Maybe before we go too much further, just from to get a gauge, how many of you do undergo an audit, whether it's an external audit, internal audit? Okay. And then how many of you have to submit financial statements to a lender or some other type of user outside of your organization? Okay, so I work in the auditing world, so most of my focus is gonna be on like what the auditor likes to look at, but it also is gonna be applicable to like those bankers and lenders and anyone who's really like using the financial statements that you're generating out of the system. Thanks.
Cool. Then what I'm going to do is I will show you some of the financial reporting options that exist in the Sage 100 world. And do jump in anytime. So, prerequisites for good financial reporting. What are we talking about here? The first thing that you're going to need is a solid chart of accounts. It sounds obvious, but you have to have a good chart of accounts. I've worked with many clients where the chart of accounts is somewhat nonsensical, and it makes financial reporting very difficult, and it also makes helping them determine issues with postings very difficult. So you need to have a good solid chart of accounts. That consists of several different things. Okay, in Sage 100, when you set up your general ledger, you have to define your account groups. Okay, your account groups determine which accounts are going to be considered asset accounts, which accounts are going to be considered liability accounts, which will be sales, which will be expense accounts, etc. So you want to make sure that your account groups are set up in a way that makes sense and follows standard accounting principles, GAAP. And I will be showing you this stuff in the software. So your account numbering scheme. Okay, so when you set up your account groups, you're saying from within this range, any account that is added is going to be, say, an asset or will be a sales account by default. But it is possible when you set up a new account to assign it to whichever group you want. I have seen this. It is ugly. Account numbering scheme, what I'm really referring to is make sure that you leave enough room in your account numbering scheme. So if down the road, as your business changes, as your business needs change, that you can actually add accounts as necessary. What I have seen in the past is where you have companies that have, say, 3-digit main accounts, and they number them so tightly, there's no room to add another account. So if you have, 150, 151, 152, 153, and then your business changes, and all of a sudden you really need something between 152 and 153, I was brought in on a new account where they actually had added something down in the 600 range, but assigned it into the asset group. So you ran their financial reports, and here's this 100 range, and something with a 600 number showed up in the assets. Then they needed help trying to figure out why things were posting where they were at. And it was just an absolute mess. So you want to have a good account numbering scheme. Now, some of the things that you can do with your account numbers is if you don't have enough room and you need to add an account, you can expand them. Okay, a Sage 100 journal account number can be up to 32 characters and 10 segments. So if you want to have a huge GL account structure, you can. I don't recommend it. But let's say that your numbering scheme is 151, 152. You're using 3-digit main accounts. You can add another digit to that very easily. You can't shrink them, but you can add to them. So we could make 151, 1510. 152 goes to 1520. Now we have room where we can add more accounts. The other thing that you can do is you could add another segment. Now, some of the smaller clients will have just those natural or main account numbers, but it is possible to add a second segment, a third segment, etc. Like I said, up to 10 different segments. That's another way that you can potentially expand your chart of accounts while still having everything in alignment. So those sub-accounts, account segments. If you use those, one of the things that you want to make sure, and believe me, I've seen this way too many times, is that that segment is used consistently throughout your chart of accounts. And what I mean by that is if you are using that, say down in your expense area, income and expense, and you're using that for a location because you have multiple facilities, don't use it for something else like a department up in your assets. And I've seen that because you can do reporting by segment. So you could run essentially a location level P&L, but it gets awfully ugly if in one part of the chart of accounts, you're using that second segment for location and someplace else it's a department or a manager or something like that. Now everything is messed up. You can't do a clean report because you have to now start excluding accounts. Well, wait a minute, in this one, it's not the location, that kind of thing. Roll-up codes. Does anybody here use roll-up codes in Sage 100?
Want to?
Do you even know what a roll-up code is? I will show you what a roll-up code is. Roll-up codes in Sage 100 are essentially a dynamic segment. Okay. So the example that I'll give you, and I will show you, is in the ABX company. They would like to be able to run financial statements by marketing manager. Okay, they have multiple locations, but marketing managers can be assigned to different locations at different times. They can change. So Ken might be the marketing manager for Irvine, but then later on they give Irvine to Tom and I get San Francisco. Well, you don't want to have to renumber your chart of accounts to accommodate that. But you can assign a roll-up code of manager to GL accounts, change it as necessary, but still run your financials based on that roll-up code. So it's almost like a dynamic segment that you can adjust, and you can have up to 4 different roll-up code categories. And I will show those to you. So, solid chart of accounts, why it matters.
Yeah. From the auditor standpoint, it's probably less likely to affect a lender or someone like that who gets your financials, but from an auditor standpoint, we are also going to import your chart of accounts into our audit software. And so we are going to map it on our end as well. So we can't just take your mapping automatically, unfortunately. We have to map it ourselves. So that's why the sequential chart of accounts is really important, because then it helps us to know where we should map certain accounts if the numbering sequence, is in order. And then we'll map that to like the financial statement line items. The second thing I wanted to mention that Ken talked about, like segments and making sure that those are consistent. If you're using the segments, it's really helpful for us as auditors to run different analytics by those segments. So he mentioned the locations. So when we do analytics specifically on the revenue and expense accounts, we might run some type of analytic by location. And then we can, if maybe revenues are down and we're wondering why that is, well, we can pinpoint which location it is, as opposed to coming to you and saying, why are revenues down? That's not a very easy question to answer necessarily. But if we can say, why are revenues down at XYZ location, that's a little bit more helpful. Similar with, any type of expense analytic. So we also prefer that the sub accounts are kind of like consistently applied and meaningful in some way. so that we can run those types of analytics.
Quick question,
Yeah.
when you talk about expanding the account, if you haven't left enough gap between that,
Mhm.
and you add an extra digit on it.
Mhm.
Do you then have to run a renumbering process that has to go through every user of that prior account?
Now,
How does it reconcile? Price.
I guess,
In other words, if my
The
account
fields,
number was,
the field in the database is long enough, and so it's just padded right now, and so you're just adding, like, it just goes underneath.
well, actually, it's even beyond that.
Yeah.
The general ledger, chart of accounts is actually the one table in Sage 100 where they have a separate key.
unique ID.
It's a unique key, it's 9 digits, and it might be, you know, 0100 blah, 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 E, or something like that. That's the key assigned to that account. So it's totally independent of the actual structure itself. So if you took that natural segment, you could stick a 0 on the character, or depending if it's alphanumeric, a character or digit on the front or on the back. And it will simply adjust the numbers, but that key stays the same.
So the account number that everyone sees is the display name, if you will, of that field, but the key never changes.
Correct.
Thank you.
And feel free to ask questions. Okay, so let's run quickly through what I was just talking about. So in the general ledger in setup, you have your account group maintenance. Okay, so as I said, this is where you're saying what's a current asset, what's a fixed asset, that asset, other assets, liabilities, on and on. And how Sage works is it's going from up to that range. So current assets are going to be 5 zeros up to 14,999. And then your fixed assets will be 15,000 up to 17,999, etc. You can break these up however you want, because if you establish a new one, you determine what category it belongs to. I recently helped a client set up theirs, and they have multiple different types of expense accounts. They have like marketing expense accounts, they have, direct sales expense accounts, but they all belong in the expenses section.
How do the non-financial category accounts work?
Non-financial accounts basically allow you to track things like square footage. You can literally just key into them. So you could have square footage, you could have number of employees, etc. Because if you do an allocation entry, you can allocate general ledger entries based on square footage, based on number of employees, things such as that. Okay, so our accounts themselves, we'll take a look at our main account maintenance here. This is where we were talking about making sure that you leave enough room. So if you need to add another main account, you can go ahead and plug something in. Because again, when you set up a new account, you can assign it to whatever group you want, but it really helps if it's in alignment with what the default group is. It's like, a cash account in the 7,000s?
Yeah.
This makes no sense. Okay, sub accounts, again, you can have as many as you would like as long as they are consistent. In this particular ABX demo company, they have a lot. I think these are actually kind of redundant, but they have city, location, product line, and department set up as sub accounts. So that you combine, you have your main along with your city, location, product line, department. That's a little excessive, but it's not unusual for my clients to have 3 segments where they might actually have a location and department segment is not unusual at all. So you have your main, your location, your department.
Does product line follow the inventory product line?
It can,
It doesn't have to.
doesn't have to. Literally, you are creating these. So if I wanted to create a new segment, I would simply go to my account structure maintenance. And this is where I could define another segment if I wanted to. That can be either alphanumeric or numeric. What size do I want it to be and what description am I giving it? That's where product line came from. So the roll-up codes. Roll-up codes are actually really cool. In general ledger options, this is where we can define our 4 different roll-up types. And I've defined one called manager. Okay, once in general ledger options, you've defined what your 4 different types are, and you can use 1, 2, 3, 4, however many you want. Then in setup, you have roll-up code maintenance. And this is where you say, for my roll-up type manager, what are the values that I want to have? So I've defined this various sales managers. These then can be assigned to any GL account in account maintenance. So here I have the ability to pick any account, and it doesn't make sense that I choose a cash account, but you can choose any manager and then do reporting based on that roll-up code. If the manager changes, you can change it at the account level. Okay. The next thing that, and this is huge, I don't know how to emphasize this enough. A thorough understanding of where the transactional postings come from. Short of doing a GL general journal entry, all the dollars that hit the GL accounts come from some kind of transaction. It's a PO receipt of goods. It's a sales order invoice. It's an inventory adjustment. Some action, some transaction has occurred that has hit that GL account. I get asked questions, balance what it is. Why is this account's balance what it is? Look at the transactions. That's the keys to the kingdom. Because people say, I don't understand where this came from. I'm going to go in, I'll look at the transactions to help them figure it out, but that's where it comes from. Know your journal types and sources. That really matters as well. I actually ran some aspects of this presentation past one of my clients, controller for my largest client, which is a publicly traded company with 10 different companies in about 14 locations nationwide. And he said that has saved his butt in audits so many times, where he can actually prove to the auditor where a posting came from, because he intimately knows how the system posts and he knows the journal types and sources. Make sure your transactions are posting correct. So basically, make sure the system's set up right. You know, I've had a lot of clients that are asking me again, you know, where's this number coming from? And I look and it's like, what are you doing? I was working with a client the other day, and it was probably one of the more bizarre setups I've ever seen, where they're taking applied labor, which usually we have down next to the cost of goods sold section, and they were posting it to an asset account as some kind of accrued payroll posting. Yeah, okay. If that's what you guys do and it works, great. But it's not something I've normally seen. And if you're going to ask me to help reconcile this, I can't, because I know where the posting came from. Still somewhat bizarre. Make sure your transactions are posting correctly. And the last thing then is to know how to parse GL journal entries from the rest. If I ever get asked, how come my AP trial balance does not tie out to my AP account? The first thing that I will do is take a look at the AP account, and I'll show you a couple ways that you can do it, but determine what journal entries were made to that account. If they didn't come from AP, if they didn't come from purchase order, and you posted journal entries, that's probably why that GL account doesn't tie to your AP trial balance. So.
Why it matters. The auditor, or maybe if you get a review or even a comp, and lenders, the first thing that we're going to do once we get your current year trial balance is compare it to the prior year. And we're going to identify accounts that change. And so we're going to probably come back to you and say, why did this account change? And so understanding where the transactions come from is going to help you pinpoint that. Or alternatively, a lot of times during audit, we'll ask the client to give us the general ledger detail. And then we can kind of do our own research on, are there some type of unusual transactions or something that stands out? So our focus really on the audit and lenders as well is on something that's changed, outside of the norm or is different from the prior year. And also auditing standards require the auditor to actually test some, general journal entries specifically. So like, as Ken mentioned, if he's got the AP balance doesn't agree to the subledger, and it's because there's those general journal entries. As auditors, we are required to actually test some of those general journal entries. So it's helpful if you understand what those are, and helpful if you can give us a report of those so that we know what the population is.
So let me go ahead and change companies here real quick. ABC company. And this is demo data, so it's not a hugely great data set, but so if I go into any given general ledger account, I have a transactions tab. And this is going to show me, this came from a sales order source journal. This was a CD or a cash disbursement. Here's an AR invoice entry. Here are journal entries that hit this account. Okay, so the transactions are the keys to the kingdom for how come my ending balance is that number. It came from the transactions. The system didn't just make it up on its own. Now, to be honest, occasionally the system will get out of whack. There is a recalculate GL balances utility that can be run. So if for some reason the sum of the transactions don't equal what you're seeing in the GL, you can actually recalc those to make sure that they actually are accurate. That's just a quick aside. Set up, make sure the transactions are posting where they should. Know those journal types and sources that you're going to see. But how to determine if you have just general ledger postings to a given account. There's a couple different ways that you can do that. One is going to be your general ledger detail report. And so I'm running the general ledger detail report here. I'm going to print it condensed, and I'm going to run it against that same account. So what I end up getting are what you just saw on that transactions tab. It's going to show me my source journal. I'm going to have some reference numbers as far as invoice data entry and things such as that. But this is going to be a mix of everything coming from all modules. But there is a checkbox, which hopefully you're aware of here, or a drop down for source type. And you can choose in the general ledger detail report to just see what came from the general ledger. When I change it to that, now we know that these are ones that were actually keyed in. Someone chose a source journal of CD, but these were actually came from a entry in general ledger journal entry.
Now, I've had debates with people about when you're entering GL entries,
Mhm.
should you assign them to like what it would have posted as if somebody had done the posting correctly? Or should you just use JG as the? You get the question?
Yeah, kind of a business process question, because there are some instances where you're going to use something other than, GJ or JE. Oftentimes for payroll entries, if you're not processing payroll in the system, someone's going to want to key that into, if they might have set up as a standard or a recurring journal entry. And they'll create a PR journal type. So the advantage that you have here, though, is the system does know the source module where it came from. And that's kind of way number 2 of reporting on this. Yeah. It would be possible to do that, but I'll show you an even better way. How many people here use Business Insights Explorer? Ooh, you people need to use Business Insights Explorer.
Except it's ridiculously slow when there's lots of
If you got a ton of data, it can be slow. Yes, I will grant you that. But Business Insights Explorer is a drag and drop end user facing tool for you to analyze information. So if I take a look at my account transactions view, and I didn't intend this to be a BIE session, but it's worth taking the time. Okay. This will show me my account transactions that have been posted. You have the ability in Business Insights Explorer to build filters on it. So you can give it a date range, you can give it an account range, you can do whatever you would like to do here. You also have very Excel-like controls. So if I want to do it based on posting date, I can do all custom, I can choose one. Okay, this also does export to Excel in a half a heartbeat, which is really cool.
Export the detail as well.
Yeah, you actually can. You actually can. You can drill into the detail and export that.
I haven't figured that out.
We can show you that. But one of the nice things is you have the ability to change your column settings. This is where you can start bringing in additional information from any of the tables that are already linked in this view. So, bless you. She's allergic to the general ledger. Yeah. So I can choose source module. I can say I want to see the source module for this. If I want to see, now this is going to be my user created key. Okay. But you can then pull into, if you look at sy_user, you can see the key equals which user. And so you could potentially do a VLOOKUP kind of thing. You see if they have, yeah, they just have account history and posting. But I can add those two columns. So here's my user created key. Here's my source module. You can move stuff around if you want to. If you want to group by a given account, you can.
So what we were looking at before, we could then filter the source module to GL, right? That's us back to the subgroup of manually derived ones.
You got it. So if I go to GL, when I go ahead and say, okay, the account that I want to look at is that 45001 account that I was looking at, was going to 0100. There you go. Here are those same source module GL entries.
Can you drill into the journal entry from here and see the other side of it?
No, you would, no, not from here. You can from the transactions tab in General Ledger. If you're on the account and you've got the transactions, if you double click on it, it shows you everything. Okay, so just to show you that real quick. And by the way, as far as exporting to Excel, this is as simple as going File, Export, Excel.
Could you have also done that on the first couple reports that you brought up where it was like in a preview?
You can, it's kind of ugly.
Okay.
Because you get the headers and all that crap.
Print data only export, and then you turn off the, pretty much everything other than just display data. And then I've written a bunch of Excel macros to take any of those reports to.
You can also customize it in Crystal. One of the things that we'll do often is take, because you can change a report settings, we could take like the GL detail report. And I'll create a new report setting and strip out all the header information, drop it all into the line, space it out, and then you preview, hit export, and it drops in Excel perfectly. Greg Tisdale is actually doing the Crystal class, and we use it a lot for data extraction. And the nice thing is the standard reports in the system are all done in Crystal. So you can create new report settings on a standard report and then modify the underlying Crystal report as much as you want, which is actually a pretty fast way to do data extracts. No, actually you can use the WKS.
Well, the problem I have is many times when I do that, copy the report and then try to make a modification on it, I don't know the underlying query that builds the WKS. There's no way to get in and see what that is.
True.
Yeah.
The query actually is coming from the user interface.
Yeah.
Your selection criteria, that's your query. But you actually can
So how did you get the detail to go out to Excel with it there? I'm sorry, if you just saved me a ton of time, big show.
No, it's just not like the parent-child type stuff, where like you get all the child and each of the parent rows. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but I want the detail on the bottom.
Yeah.
Right, so if I come in here and then what I can do is I can drill into the preview, which is our transaction detail. You'll notice down here, it filters it. Okay, based on the account that I was sitting on, but if I kill that filter, now I've got all the detail. Okay, and you can dump this out to Excel. It's kind of like a double drill down. But if I come in here and edit the column settings here, I still have available my detail posting, my account history. So if I wanted to add stuff that was the next level up, like my account key, my posting date, stuff like that, you can. It's the same sort of thing if you're looking at, say, sales orders, the sales order view. And down below your preview is the lines. Well, you can drill into the lines and add anything from the sales order header that you might want to that view and then export it.
Thank you.
And then back to your question in the back. No, we're doing fine. We've got plenty of time. So if I come to any given transaction here, if I double click on it, well, that came from an invoice. So I'm going to get my invoice detail. Let me do my JE. There's your journal entry. Just a double click and you've got the entire entry.
And I don't know the version, but would all of our Vrakas clients have that capability in their versions most likely?
Most likely, yes. That drill down should be there. Don't ask me what version. I think it's been there forever. That one, but
Should be there.
should be there. This is huge. Make sure you do proper period end, although I know that, according to Sage, we're gonna do away with period end processing. But for now, until that happens, make sure you do proper period end processing and you tie out your subledgers. I don't know how to emphasize this more than I can. And I know Kara's gonna emphasize the Jesus out of it. If your AP trial balance does not tie out to your AP GL account, something's wrong. I'll go back to that client I mentioned. Very large client, 85 user Sage 100 system, 15 locations, publicly traded the whole bit. There are 3 staff controllers. That's it. They can close out the entire organization in under 3 days because they really keep an eye on their books. And they are publicly traded, so they have internal and external audit. I think D&T's internal and E&Y are external. And I've been on some calls with the E&Y auditors, and
They're intense.
auditors are intense. Kara's not, she's not, but she can be intense, so don't stick around. Use paperless office for your journals and registers. That's another thing that I would highly, highly recommend. Years ago, if you bought Mass 90, and I don't know how long you've been on it, but you used to actually get a box of manuals for each module. So when I showed up, I was literally carrying a box and people felt like they were getting something for their money. Now you get an email. That's it. But one of those boxes used to have a whole forest of trees on them. A whole forest of trees. And we used to joke, those are the trees that you kill printing your journals and registers. But with paperless office, you don't have to do that. Paperless office will present a journal or register to you in a PDF and automatically save it on your server. The reason that I'm emphasizing this is that's your audit trail. Okay, it's now going to be digital in the form of PDFs on your server. It's a phenomenal way to do things. Not only does it save paper, but it is your audit trail. Yeah.
One thing that we found though is we can't figure out how to set the permissions such that paperless office can create the reports as people are using the system.
Yeah.
But that people can't go in and delete them or, whether it's accidental or whatever, or modify.
It is possible to do that.
So
Yeah,
I want to connect with you on
Yeah.
because that's been gigantic pain.
Yeah, it's definitely possible to do that. The reason I emphasize this is I have one client that I have smacked about the face and neck multiple times over decades. They still just preview these things, say, yep, that looks good, and update it, and they're not doing it to paperless office. So whenever they call me and say, hey, the controller wants to know, or the owner wants to know, where did this number come from? I'm like, do you have the journal or registered? No, we don't. They never do because they're not saving. If they ever get externally audited, they're gonna have issues.
Okay, the period end close and then the subledgers. You know, public accounting is kind of an interesting industry because we hire people right out of college. So when your auditors come to do your audit, you probably have a person there that's like been working for 3 or 4 years, and then you have a 22-year-old who's never done this before. And one of the things that we do first when we get, like, let's say we ask for an AR listing or an inventory listing, we're gonna flip the listing and then we're gonna try to agree it to the trial balance. And if it doesn't tie, we're right away like, oh, man, and I can remember vividly like working with a new staff person and he would get it and he would try to tie it out and he would just like, it doesn't tie. It doesn't tie, you know, kind of throw his hands up, it doesn't tie. And without, you know, having experience, it's hard to think through like, well, what would be the reasons that it doesn't tie? Is there a journal entry? You know, was there like a late posted invoice or something? But that is the first thing we're going to do. And I will say, like, if right away everything doesn't tie, you know, we're sitting in our little audit room together and we kind of just go, oh, every time we're like a little bit more deflated, like it doesn't tie, it doesn't tie, it doesn't tie. On the other hand, when it ties, we're like, it ties, yes, now I can use this, you know, use this AR listing and start my work.
The problem is it takes that's the month end thing. It takes so long to do month end that some people are doing last month's stuff while this month's stuff's going on, and that's almost always where it comes into play. It's you either post it to the previous month or the current month when it was supposed to be the other. And so I'm just bringing that up as I think it's relevant to this point of.
And we definitely. Yeah, we definitely do see that, and so we definitely have clients where they, you know, show the dollar amount or whatever in the entry and say, this is exactly what happened, it got posted. And at least then we know what it is and we can go from there, whether it needs to be adjusted in financials or something. So I think identifying those reconciling items for the auditors and probably for the lender is super important.
Yeah, I will interject one other thing though too, is the true financial control documents in Sage 100 are the trial balance documents. I've had a lot of discussions with banks over the years where they're like, well, the aging should tie. And it's not really in Sage 100, it's the trial balance. Yeah. Yeah, because you start looking at dates, okay? The trial balance reports are based on posting date. So those are going to tie to the general ledger. You're aging either by invoice date or invoice due date. Those aren't necessarily going to tie to the general ledger because maybe I got an invoice in October for November's health insurance payment, and I'm going to book it. I'm going to put it in October. That's when I got the invoice because I want the terms code to calculate the due date out correctly. But I want to book the expense since it's November's insurance payment in November. So if I run my October trial balance versus the aging, it doesn't work if I'm running it against invoice date. But if I do the trial balance, it works perfectly because that invoice won't show up on the trial balance in October. It won't show up till November. That's why in Sage 100, it's the trial balance reports that are really the financial control documents. And again, I have to explain it to the bank so many times, and that's why we end up with people who are working in the prior month. I'm going to wait 2 weeks into November so that when I get in AP invoices, I can enter next month. You don't need to do that. You know, you're okay. It's fine.
Then the other thing I was just gonna mention was like the period end close. So another kind of like first step that we do as auditors is take like the retained earnings account from the current year trial balance, compare it to last year and make sure we understand those differences. So we basically make sure that the equity rolls. In some cases, it won't roll if, for example, we made some audit adjustments in the prior period and maybe the client didn't make them. for some reason, but that's just another thing that we do as kind of like one of our first checks when we import the trial balance to make sure that the data that we're looking at is good for us to kind of like start going forward.
So the standard financials that the system comes with is if I'm in general ledger reports, I can go into financial reports. And there is a wizard that walks you through creating your report. Okay, you can have multiple different groups. And I'm just going to say that I want to do a new financial report, and literally it will walk me through this. So I'm going to have one called Ken. We can do income statements, quarterly statements, balance sheets, trend reports, cash flows. The trend reports are very handy, by the way. We'll do an income statement. I'll leave it in the standard group. That's fine. We can choose what type of income statement is this? Is this going to be a combined segment? Combined statement? Actually, let me bail out of here. I want to go to a different company. Oops, not user, company. New one. We'll do Ken again. Reason I wanted to come back to this company is because I can do combined summary. I can choose any of my segments, or here's that roll-up code. So if I wanted to do an income report, an income statement, but I want to do it by marketing manager, I can do that. Do I want it to be period to date, year to date, both period to date and year to date data? Is my column going to be, and I'm not going to read all these to you, but you've got a lot of options available to you. And you basically just next through some formatting. Do I want to print the GL numbers? Do I want accounts with zero balance? Footnotes? Do I want to assign a specific range of accounts or specific segments or specific manager, or do I want to key these in using runtime ranges at the time I run the report? And then here then is actually running the report. I said runtime ranges, so I can assign those at this time. If it was a trend report, I'd have some control on that. It's because I picked a bad report. Gotta love demo data.
Yeah.
But in any case, that gives you an idea of how the standard financial reports can be put together. And for a lot of people, those are fine. One of the other options that comes with the system is Sage Intelligence. Is anyone here using Sage Intelligence for financial reporting? Sage Intelligence comes with the system, so you get it. What Sage Intelligence is it is a product that Sage bought years ago. And it is a middleware that extracts data from Sage 100 and ports it out to Excel. So you're really defining a lot of the report in an Excel template. The nice thing about Sage Intelligence is that it will allow you to do consolidated reporting across multiple Sage 100 companies. So if you have multiple Sage 100 companies, you can do a combined report here. And I'm just going to run the demo. So it's going to load the report. It's going to pull the data in, it's going to format it, and then it will dump it out to Excel, and I'll show you what the output is here. It takes just a second to run. This can be run for more than just financials. This can be run against any module in Sage 100. You can do sales dashboards. You can do inventory reports. You can do anything that you would like to do. Yeah. There is a manual also that we could provide you that would do, if you're at all good with Excel and you're on the financial side of life, you would like this. It really is, and this is going way back, replacement for FRX. If any of you guys ever remember FRX, like every accounting package known to mankind came with FRX. Microsoft bought it and killed it 12 years ago. So everyone's scrambling. What are we going to replace FRX with? This is it. So basically, this is gonna provide me with my balance sheet. If I wanna see, and this is all based on the formatting, if I wanna see the individual accounts, I can. This is gonna provide me with my income statement. My summary income statement. Statement of cash flows. Here's my monthly statement of cash flows, and including a beautiful little graph. The nice thing is with this, the keys to the kingdom is this add-in that you're seeing on the right, where if I'm creating a new report, I can choose, do I want to do a balance sheet, current period, year to date, etc. So you can choose a format. It will provide you with lists coming from Sage of your account categories, groups, your roll-up codes, everything that you would need to actually structure the report, and predefined formulas that you can drag and drop into the spreadsheet so that you don't have to actually develop this formula yourself in Excel to try to come up with the number. And if you happen to have reporting trees, like here, ABX has cities and departments, you can actually set up those reporting trees in this as well. I am not an expert with this product for financial reporting, but Dana Halpin, who I work with, is. She is our Sage Intelligence financial reporting guru, so she can definitely help you with it. One of the other things that you do get with it too is it has the built-in ability to set up distribution lists, so it can't send the reports out for you. It's actually a really, really cool product. Now, some of the other options that are available is we have Sage Enterprise Intelligence. There's a session on that later today. That is an additional cost. There's Sage Data and Analytics. There was actually a session on that now, I believe. And there are some other third-party products out there. But 99% of our clients are using just the standard financials, which again, if your account structure is nice and neat and everything's where it should be, they work great. Or Sage Intelligence.
Just from a standpoint, there's been a few times where previous auditors have requested, I would like your data to look like X. And I've worked with a couple of your consultants before. Just we create a custom Sage report, or a crystal report really quick. That isn't even tied to any of the modules. Just create one, dump it out. Here's your data. And so just if you're not aware of that ability, a lot of times that's helpful. And if you like, if you're, especially if your auditor asks for something very specific, I don't know how to get it. It's in the system. Don't spend too much time. Just call your consultant and be like, dump this for me, please.
Yeah, we tend to be very particular.
I started doing that 2 years ago, where it's just like, okay, if that's what you want, I'll hand it off to the third party consultant. They'll dump the data. Then there's no questions about it. Here you go. And I can explain where the data came from, but I didn't produce it for you. I didn't whatever. And that seemed to has streamlined several of the audit field exam type stuffs where it's just.
Any of you guys work for a publicly traded company at all, or don't if you can avoid it? The client I keep referring to that shall remain nameless, E&Y is taking SOX compliance to its reducto ad absurdum. I mean, they're basically asking for source code. If we run a report, what's the system doing behind the scenes? And it's like, and I actually, one of my pushbacks, I was on a call with them. I said, look, you guys use Excel, right? Yeah. Do you ask Microsoft for the source code? How do you know that Excel's working properly and summing things up correctly too? Well, yeah, got it.
It could be because there was a new auditing standard that came out last year about IT controls, so that probably like up the SOX testing and understanding in that area.
So any other questions? We're a couple minutes over, but we'll both be around all day. Yeah.
This is more perhaps a little outside this realm, but it ties in with the general ledger reporting is always tied to your account number. When it comes to inventory, account numbers are assigned to inventory on a product line basis. But the inventory valuation report that's in Sage is tied to the product type field, not the account per se. And so he found recently some discrepancies between one report and the other, we couldn't tie it out.
Mhm.
And so I was just curious if you know why the inventory valuation report isn't tied to the accounts themselves as opposed to just this, not random field, but this other criteria field called product.
Probably because again, the financial control document would be your inventory trial balance that's running off posting date, more so than the valuation.
So all tied directly to the GL account, which is derived from the.
Product line.
The other question becomes, how are you setting up your product lines to accounts that that's becoming problematic?
Well, that's how this came about. We just did an overarching review of that
Yeah.
and found certain products that are sometimes the raw material and sometimes the finished good, and it's a gray.
Yeah, and that's.
You will find differences between the valuation and trial balance if you're like in a FIFO, LIFO. Those will tend to be rounding differences. They shouldn't be significant because trial balance is running off basically a summarized table, whereas the valuation, you can show the individual tiers and it's going to total those up. So you can have some minor differences between them, but nothing should be material. I mean, it should be like tens of dollars difference just due to rounding.
Balance to the penny every day.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
With that, on to the next. Thank you.